He was never meant to be king. A shy, stammering second son thrust onto the world stage by a scandal that threatened the monarchy itself. This is the incredible true story of King George VI, a man who found his voice when his nation needed it most. Before he was George VI, he was Prince Albert, or Bertie, to his family. Born in 1895, he grew up in the long shadow of his older brother, Edward. While Edward was charismatic, confident, and groomed to be the future king, Bertie was reserved, plagued by ill health, and a severe stammer that made public speaking a terrifying ordeal. Imagine being a prince, expected to give speeches and command respect, but every word is a struggle. It was a source of deep personal frustration for him. He tried everything, from the strange to the scientific. Early therapists even had him smoke to relax his larynx, which, as you can guess, didn't help and likely contributed to his later health problems. His early life was defined by duty, but not the ultimate duty of a sovereign. He served in the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force during World War I, even seeing action at the Battle of Jutland. He was a dedicated and competent officer, but he was always the spare, not the heir. After the war, he took on the usual royal duties, opening factories and supporting charities. In 1923, he married Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, a woman whose strength, wit, and unwavering support would become his anchor. She famously turned down his proposal twice, hesitant about the restrictive life of a royal, but eventually his persistence won her over. It was one of the best decisions she ever made, not just for him, but for the future of Britain. Together, they had 2 daughters, Princess Elizabethias, the future Queen Elizabeth II, and Princess Margaret. They were a close, happy family, living a relatively private life far from the glare of the main spotlight. Then, everything changed. In 1936, his father, King George V, died. His brother Edward ascended the throne as King Edward VIII. But Edward's reign was destined to be short-lived. He was deeply in love with Wallis Simpson, an American socialite who was not only a commoner but also twice divorced. In the 1930s, this was a massive scandal. The Church of England, of which the king is the head, did not permit remarriage if a former spouse was still living. The government and the public were staunchly opposed to the idea of Wallis becoming queen. Edward was faced with an impossible choice: the throne or the woman he loved. He chose love. On December 11, 1936, Edward VIII abdicated the throne. The news sent shockwaves through the empire, and just like that, the quiet, stammering Duke of York, Bertie, was king. He was terrified. He reportedly sobbed on his mother's shoulder, saying he never wanted this, that he wasn't prepared. He chose the regnal name George VI, a deliberate nod to his father, to symbolize continuity and stability in a time of crisis. His coronation in May 1937 was a grand affair, but behind the scenes, it was an immense personal challenge. He had to recite ancient, complex oaths in front of the entire world, his every word scrutinized. This is where the story you might know from the movie The King's Speech comes in. With the encouragement of his wife Elizabeth, he began working with an unconventional Australian speech therapist named Lionel Logue. Logue used unusual methods, a mix of physical exercises, breathing techniques, and psychological coaching. He treated the king not as a royal, but as an equal, a man named Bertie. It was a relationship built on trust and mutual respect, and it was transformative. Logue didn't cure the stammer, but he gave George the tools and the confidence to manage it. He helped him find his voice, and he would need it, because the abdication crisis was just the opening act for a much larger, more terrifying global drama. Across Europe, the storm clouds of war were gathering. Adolf Hitler's Germany was on the march. The British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain pursued a policy of appeasement, hoping to avoid conflict. But in September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and Britain was forced to declare war. On that day, King George VI faced his greatest test yet. He had to deliver a live radio address to the nation and the empire to rally his people for the fight ahead. He sat in a small room in Buckingham Palace, the microphone in front of him, Lionel Logue by his side. The script was marked with pauses and breathing cues. As he began to speak, his voice, though hesitant, was filled with a quiet resolve. He spoke of the solemn hour of the fight against a thing, which, if it were to prevail, would be fatal to any civilized order in the world. He didn't hide his struggle, the slight pauses, the effort in his voice made him seem not weak, but human, Relatable. He wasn't a distant, perfect monarch. He was one of them, sharing their fears and their determination. The speech was a resounding success. He had united his people. Throughout the war, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth became powerful symbols of British resistance. When advised to evacuate the princesses to Canada, the Queen famously declared, "The children won't go without me. I won't leave the King, and the King will never leave." They remained in London, even as the bombs of the Blitz rained down. Buckingham Palace itself was hit 9 times. After one bombing, the Queen said she was glad we had been bombed. "It makes me feel I can look the East End in the face." They toured bomb sites, met with factory workers, visited troops, and offered comfort and encouragement to a weary, battered, but unbroken nation. Their presence was a constant source of morale. The King wasn't just a figurehead. He was a leader who shared the dangers and hardships of his people. When the war finally ended in 1945, the King and his family stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, waving to the jubilant crowds below. They had seen Britain through its darkest hour. The post-war years, however, brought new challenges. The British Empire began to transition into the Commonwealth of Nations, a major shift in global power. At home, a new Labour government brought in sweeping social changes, including the creation of the National Health Service. The King, a heavy smoker for most of his life, especially during the stressful war years, saw his health decline rapidly. He was diagnosed with lung cancer, and in 1951 had a lung removed. He never fully recovered. On the morning of February 6, 1952, King George VI died in his sleep at Sandringham House. He was only 56 years old. The man who never expected to rule had reigned for just over 15 years, but his impact was profound.